You used to love things. You remember that, don't you? There was a time when a good book could pull you in for hours, when a song could make you feel something so deep you replay it until the emotion wore thin, when a meal with someone you loved wasn't something to get through, it was the whole point. But lately, something has shifted. The book sits on your nightstand, half finished. The music plays, but it just plays. You scroll past things that should excite you and feel almost nothing. Not sadness exactly, not depression, just absence, a strange flatness where pleasure used to live. And the worst part, you can't explain it. Your life isn't falling apart. Nothing is technically wrong. So why does everything feel like you're watching it through glass? If this sounds familiar, stay here. Because what you're experiencing isn't laziness, isn't ingratitude, isn't some character flaw you need to fix. According to Carl Jung, this emptiness, this inability to enjoy what once nourished you may be one of the most important signals your psyche ever sends. And learning to hear it could change everything. Before we continue, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And I'd love to know, when did you first notice that things stopped feeling the way they used to? Leave a comment. You might be surprised how many people share your experience. Here's something Jung understood that most people never consider. The psyche is not designed for constant happiness. It's designed for wholeness. And these are not the same thing. We live in a world that treats joy like a metric, something to optimize, something to chase. If you're not enjoying yourself, something must be wrong. Fix it. Buy something, distract yourself, try harder. But Jung saw it differently. He recognized that the soul moves in seasons, and some seasons are not meant for harvesting, they're meant for descent. When pleasure stops working, when the things that once filled you now leave you empty, your psyche is not broken. It's redirecting. It's pulling energy away from the external world because something internal demands attention. The flatness you feel isn't an ending. It's an invitation. The question is, an invitation to what? Jung called it the confrontation with the unconscious, and it often begins exactly like this. Not with crisis, not with tragedy, but with a quiet fading. The colors drain slowly. And one day, you realize you've been going through the motions for longer than you can remember. Think about what happens when you lose the ability to enjoy something. Your first instinct is to chase harder, more stimulation, more novelty, more plans, more purchases, more distractions. And it works, briefly. A new experience can pierce through the numbness for a moment, but the relief never lasts. Soon you need something newer, something louder, something more. Jung would recognize this immediately. He called it living outward, directing all your energy toward the external world while your inner world starves, and the psyche will tolerate this for a while, years even, but eventually it rebels. It stops giving you the reward you're seeking because the reward isn't out there anymore. It's within. And no amount of external pleasure can substitute for internal meaning. This is the trap so many people fall into. They feel the emptiness and assume they need more of what used to work, more success, more entertainment, more connection. But the soul isn't hungry for more. It's hungry for depth. And until you turn inward, the flatness will follow you everywhere, even into the experiences that should feel the most alive. Jung wrote that the soul always seeks balance. When you spent years building an external life, a career, a social identity, a persona that works in the world, the unlived parts of you begin to ache. They pull at your energy. They steal your joy, not to punish you, but to get your attention, because there are parts of yourself you've never met, and they're tired of waiting. Let's go deeper into this, because it's where most explanations stop and where the real understanding begins. Jung spoke of something called the shadow, the part of you that holds everything you've rejected, suppressed, or simply never had permission to be. It's not evil. It's not darkness in the dramatic sense. It's more like a basement filled with everything you shoved out of sight, old dreams you abandoned, emotions you learned to hide, versions of yourself that didn't fit the life you were building. And here's what's crucial. The shadow doesn't just contain pain. It contains energy, vitality, aliveness. When you cut off parts of yourself, you don't just lose the difficult things. You lose the life force that was attached to them, the passion, the intensity, the capacity for deep feeling. So when you say you can't enjoy anything anymore, Jung might ask a different question. What have you buried that wants to breathe? What did you stop letting yourself feel? What parts of you have been locked away so long that your entire emotional range has narrowed? The numbness isn't random. It's the cost of keeping the basement sealed, and the only way out is down into the very places you've been avoiding. This is uncomfortable to hear. We want the solution to be external. A new habit, a new relationship, a change of scenery. But Jung was clear. Until you meet what lives in your shadow, you'll keep experiencing life through a fog. The joy you're missing isn't gone. It's trapped. It's waiting in the places you haven't dared to look. There's another layer to this that Jung explored extensively. The persona, the mask you wear to move through the world. From childhood, you learned which parts of yourself were acceptable and which weren't. You learned to perform, to adapt, to present a version of yourself that earned love, approval, safety. And this isn't weakness, it's survival. The persona helps you function in society. But the persona has a cost. The more energy you invest in maintaining the mask, the less energy you have for genuine experience. You become so skilled at performing that you forget what it feels like to simply be. And this is where enjoyment dies. Real pleasure requires presence. It requires the whole self, not just the polished surface. But if you've spent years being what others needed, if you've perfected the art of adapting, you may have lost access to the part of you that actually feels. Think about it. When was the last time you did something purely because you wanted to, not because it would look good, not because it would look good, not because it would please someone, not because it was expected? When did you last make a choice that had nothing to do with the image you maintain? Jung said the persona is necessary, but when we mistake it for our true self, we become strangers to our own experience. The mask can smile. The mask can perform enjoyment, but it cannot feel. And somewhere behind it, your real self is suffocating, waiting for a moment of authenticity that never seems to come. The flatness you feel might be this, the exhaustion of performance, the slow death of pretending, your psyche shutting down not because life is empty, but because the self you're living from isn't really you. Now we arrive at what Jung considered the central task of the second half of life, though it can begin at any age, whenever the soul demands it. He called it individuation, the process of becoming who you actually are. Individuation isn't about self-improvement. It's not about becoming a better version of the person you've been pretending to be. It's about integration, bringing together all the pieces you've scattered, the shadow, the unlived life, the abandoned dreams, the authentic self beneath the mask. And here's what's remarkable. This process often begins with exactly what you're experiencing. The loss of enjoyment is frequently the first sign that individuation is calling. The old sources of pleasure stop working because they were feeding the persona, not the soul. They were maintaining a life that no longer fits who you're becoming. Jung saw this again and again in his patients. Successful people who had everything and felt nothing. People who had built impressive external lives but felt hollow inside. And he noticed that the emptiness wasn't a sign of failure. It was a sign of readiness. The psyche was clearing the ground for something new to grow. This doesn't mean the process is easy. Individuation requires you to face what you've avoided, to grieve the unlived life, to let go of identities that no longer serve you, even if you don't yet know what will replace them. It asks you to tolerate uncertainty, to sit with the emptiness rather than immediately filling it. But on the other side of this descent is something Jung called the self, the totality of who you are, conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, united. And people who touch this describe something that goes beyond ordinary happiness. They describe meaning, presence, a sense of being fully alive that doesn't depend on circumstances. The joy you're missing isn't just coming back. It's being transformed into something deeper. There's a concept Jung returned to throughout his work that speaks directly to this experience. He called it the tension of opposites. Life, Jung observed, moves between poles, light and dark, expansion and contraction, outward and inward. The psyche needs both, but we tend to favor one side. We chase happiness and flee from sadness. We seek pleasure and avoid pain. We stay in the light and pretend the darkness doesn't exist. And for a while, this works. But the unconscious keeps score. Every feeling you refuse to feel doesn't disappear, it accumulates. Every part of life you avoid gains weight, and eventually the opposite you've been running from demands its due. The inability to enjoy things is often this reckoning. You've been living on one side of life for too long. The bright side, the productive side, the successful, optimistic, upward moving side. And now the other pole is pulling, not to destroy you, but to complete you. Jung would say the goal isn't to escape this tension, but to hold it, to learn to live in the middle, where both sides have space. This is where real depth comes from, not from eliminating negative experience, but from integrating it. Not from chasing pleasure, but from developing the capacity to be present with whatever arises. People who can hold this tension don't need constant stimulation to feel alive. They've developed an inner life rich enough to sustain them. They've stopped outsourcing their sense of meaning to external sources. And paradoxically, this is often when simple pleasures return, because they're no longer asking pleasure to do the work of the soul. Perhaps you're wondering what this looks like practically. How do you actually move through this passage? How do you work with what Jung described rather than just understanding it intellectually? The first step is simply to stop running, to let the emptiness be here without immediately trying to fix it, fill it, or interpret it as failure. The psyche speaks through symptoms, and this numbness is a communication. Treating it as an enemy only pushes you further from what it's trying to show you. Then begin to get curious about what you have suppressed. What emotions have you not allowed yourself to feel? What dreams did you abandon because they weren't practical? What parts of yourself did you learn were unacceptable? These are the places where your energy is trapped. These are the doors you'll eventually need to open. Jung worked extensively with dreams, and there's a reason. Dreams bypass the persona. They show you the unconscious directly. If you're willing, start paying attention to what visits you at night. Write it down. Sit with the images. You don't need to analyze perfectly, just begin a relationship with the parts of yourself that speak in symbols. And most importantly, make space for the descent. This might mean less doing and more being, less socializing and more solitude, less consuming and more creating. The soul doesn't need more input right now. It needs room to breathe. It needs you to stop filling every silence with noise. This is not passive. It takes tremendous courage to sit with emptiness when the world tells you to cheer up, try harder, be more grateful. But this is the work, and it cannot be skipped. Let me offer you something now. 6 insights from Jung's work that might serve as companions through this passage, not as solutions, but as reminders that what you're experiencing has been mapped before. First, the loss of enjoyment is often the beginning of transformation, not the end of happiness. Your psyche is redirecting energy from the external world to the internal. Something within you is ready to be born, and it needs your attention more than the world does right now. Second, what you suppress doesn't vanish, it waits. The shadow holds not just your pain, but your vitality. The aliveness you're missing is likely trapped in the very places you've been avoiding. Reclaiming it requires descent, not escape. Third, the persona can perform enjoyment but cannot feel it. If you spent years being who others needed, you may have lost access to genuine experience. The mask is exhausted. The real self beneath it is starving for expression. Fourth, the psyche seeks wholeness, not happiness. Constant positivity is not the goal. Integration is. When you stop running from difficulty and learn to hold the tension of opposites, a deeper kind of aliveness becomes possible. Fifth, individuation often begins with emptiness. The old sources of pleasure stop working because they were feeding a self you've outgrown. This is not failure, it's readiness. You're being prepared for a more authentic way of being. And sixth, the way out is through. There are no shortcuts past this passage, but there is a destination. People who do this work describe something beyond ordinary happiness, a sense of meaning and presence that doesn't depend on circumstances. The joy isn't gone, it's being transformed. There's an image from Jung's own life that feels relevant here. In his late 30s, at the height of his professional success, Jung experienced a profound crisis. His previous sources of meaning stopped working. He felt disconnected from his own life, and rather than run from it, he did something remarkable. He turned toward it. He began what he called his confrontation with the unconscious. He spent years exploring his inner world through active imagination, through dreams, through dialogue with figures that emerged from his own psyche. It was disorienting. At times he questioned his sanity. But what emerged from this descent became the foundation of his life's work. Jung didn't just theorize about this process, he lived it. And he discovered that the emptiness wasn't empty at all. It was full of unlived life, waiting to be claimed. This is what's possible on the other side of what you're experiencing. Not a return to who you were before, but an arrival at who you're meant to become. The flatness is not the destination, it's the doorway. Perhaps as you've listened, something has stirred, a recognition, a softening, a sense that maybe, just maybe, what you've been experiencing isn't a malfunction but a calling. Jung would tell you to trust this, not blindly, not without discernment, but with the understanding that the psyche knows what it's doing even when the conscious mind is lost. You are not broken. You are not ungrateful. You are not ungrateful. You are not failing at happiness. You are being asked to go deeper, and that is one of the most important invitations a human being can receive. The Word will tell you to try harder, feel better, optimize your way back to joy, but your soul is saying something different. It's saying that the life you've been living has become too small for who you are. It's saying that pleasure built on a false self was never going to sustain you. It's saying that there's so much more waiting beneath the surface. The flatness is not your enemy. It's the guardian of a threshold. And on the other side is a version of yourself you haven't met yet. One who doesn't need the world to provide meaning because meaning lives within. One who can feel deeply because they've stopped running from depth. One who experiences joy not as a desperate chase, but as a natural overflow of a life aligned with the soul. This is what Jung called individuation, and it's available to anyone willing to stop, listen, and descend. The glass wall between you and your life, it was never between you and the world. It was between you and yourself, and it's ready to shatter if you're ready to meet what's on the other side.